This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Welcome to Her Story, the journey to winning a seat at the table. I'm your host, Mary J. Murray, and this program is a series of conversations with inspirational women with amazing stories to share. And stories are a tapestry of lifelong events and experiences. Let's explore the journey. My guest today is Annie Vogel, also known as Pilot Annie, and she has had her private pilot license for 7 years now and has accrued over 500 hours in various aircrafts. She also has her own plane, a Piper Cherokee 140. I'm not sure what that is, but anyway, we'll find out through the segment. And she writes for One magazine and submits articles on a regular basis. She's also a supporter of General Aviation, which promotes aviation for women through support and promotions. And also she has received awards and scholarships all related to aviation. Now, Annie may not sit around a conventional table, but she is definitely in the pilot seat. And we often see very accomplished women in leadership roles, but we know that leadership can emerge at any age and at any stage. And this is Annie's journey. Welcome, Annie, and thank you for taking the time to have this conversation this morning.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the wonderful introduction.
Well, it is my pleasure to find a woman pilot, and with the experience that you have, and I'm sure that this has been an interesting journey for you. Can you reflect back on your early year influences and how all of this got started?
Yeah, of course. I came across aviation a little later in life. I feel like there are different people out there. Some people know what they want to do for a living, like straight out of the womb, it would seem. And then there's others that take a little bit more time to figure out what they like and what they'd like to pursue. So I didn't start pursuing aviation until I was 24. I was living abroad and just trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I'd finished university and college and tried out a few different things, but nothing really felt like the right fit for me. So I was living abroad, kind of taking on odd jobs as I traveled to be able to see the world. And I was living in Australia at the time, where I lived along this beautiful reef. And there were loads of tourists that would come by and they would want to swim with the whale sharks and humpback whales and see manta rays and all of that. And there was a little airstrip right next to where I lived that would have airplanes take off and look for these marine creatures. And they would basically spot them, report back to the boats in the harbor, and then the boats would be able to go out and find them for the tourists. And when I was watching them take off every day, I was like, wow, that would be such a cool job, such a cool career. And I started to do some research, started watching some, popular television, like TV shows like Bush Pilots, and thought it would be a really great fit because I was definitely, or am, very adventurous and have always loved to travel. And so I thought it would be a great way to combine my passions. And I moved back home probably about 6 months later and booked my discovery flight. That's what they call your first flight. And I loved it. And so the rest is history from there.
What is a discovery flight? You're really going to have to help me through this because this is an area that I'm really not familiar with.
Yeah, no, that's fine. A discovery flight is a flight where you actually get to take control of the airplane. It's to give people an idea as to whether they want to seriously pursue a pilot's license. So it gives you an idea of the feeling of, taking off and landing. You're obviously doing that assisted with an instructor, and just like the feeling of flight in general and what it could be like. So that's what a discovery flight is.
Well, in reading some of my research, the name Robert Redford came up in terms of sparking an interest in aviation.
Yeah, well, I mean, my mom's favorite movie growing up was Out of Africa, and in that movie, Robert Redford flies a tiger moth, which is a pretty iconic airplane. And I always had a passion for Africa as well. Have always wanted to travel there, so it was a combination of Africa and airplanes, and I was like, oh, that would just be so cool. So Africa is still actually on my hit list, but I haven't flown there yet.
So in your earlier years, that was just a passing comment, and then your experience in Australia really started to ferment.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, my family traveled a lot when we were growing up. Most of my family lives in Europe, so we spent a lot of time at airports, and so I always loved that. So I knew I kind of had an interest in it already. It wasn't until that moment in Australia where I actually thought I'd pursue it.
So when you came back to Canada and started to really become engaged in this, what kind of training did you have to go through?
Yeah, so to get your private pilot's license, which is kind of the first step if you would like to make a career out of, aviation and being a pilot. So for that, you sign up at a flight school, and they've got instructors available. So they pair you up with an instructor, and generally you'll do all your lessons with one instructor just so that they understand where you are in the process of learning, and they'll help you along with everything. There's also ground school components. So essentially, yes, you are flying an airplane, but you're also spending a lot of time on the ground studying theory, figuring out how an airplane actually flies, different control surfaces, how everything works. And when you've accrued enough time in the airplane and you've gone through all the required lessons, you're then able to do your flight test. And so there is an in-flight portion of the test, and then there's an exam, like a written exam. And once you complete and pass both of those, you receive your private license. And then after that, if you'd like to continue to pursue a career in aviation, you can get your commercial license, which is you're held to a different standard, obviously, because you're going to be flying passengers.
Well, certainly, even with your private license, you're able to fly passengers within your smaller plane.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So the biggest difference is that I can't take paying passengers. So I can't operate as a paid service. So I can take up friends, I can take up family. We can literally travel anywhere within North America as long as we're flying, an aircraft that I'm, certified to fly or checked out in. And so there's no restrictions there. It's just that as soon as I take payment for a flight, I have to be operating under a commercial charter business, there's a lot of formalities and legalities involved with that.
Well, you have different stages in your flight journey, but I think that women in this career path, there's only about 6% women who are pilots. Do you ever find that you have a voice in what is happening on a larger scale?
You know what? It's hard to say because I'm not involved in aviation on a larger scale sense, especially within the airline industry. So the percentages of pilots is broken out into many different segments. So I think 6 to 7% is the average for airline pilots for specifically. Within that, there's only 2% of women that are captains within airline positions. But then currently there's actually 12% in flight schools. So those numbers are changing, and I've, in the last 7 years, seen a huge growth in seeing women within flight schools and doing their flight training. So I'm hoping that that will obviously impact the airlines in just a few years. But as far as, you know, having a voice, I absolutely think that we have one. I think that you could have a better presence, and there could be more women involved in all areas within aviation, not just operations, but engineering and flight training itself, or operations kind of in general.
Well, do you feel that you have a voice in the articles that you are submitting to the magazine?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely do. It's funny, over time it's evolved, and it's become more like authoritative, almost like strong, because now after all this time, I know how much I know. And I think that anybody, when they start something new, they doubt their knowledge in something. And so now, after spending so much time in the industry and sort of immersing myself in general aviation specifically, it's made me a bit of an expert in the field. So I think I can speak to it passionately and truly, and get my point across and share that passion with other people.
And you're doing that with some of the organizations that you are connecting with, and in mentoring other women, and sparking that interest in aviation and perhaps young girls.
Yeah, so there's a number of different organizations that support women in aviation and in STEM. And the organizations that I've been a part of have played a huge role within the aviation community and outside of the aviation community in getting women interested. Some of the events that are kind of pivotal to getting young girls and women interested give them a chance to actually fly an airplane. So one of the organizations that I was volunteering for before was called Girls Take Flight, which was out of Oshawa, and pilots like myself would volunteer their aircraft and their time to take girls flying. And because it was through a charitable organization and there was no exchange of money, we could do that. And it was something like 300 young girls every year would be taken up on their first flight, which is super impactful if you think about it. So there's that event, and then there's loads of scholarships to get women involved in aviation. And there's a really great program that actually gives awards to women who have done incredible things in aviation. There's a gala every year, obviously outside of COVID times, where incredible women who have been trailblazers and have done these incredible things are awarded for their achievements, but also used as a platform to reach out to even more women. So there's a lot of really great things happening out there for anyone that's interested. Definitely look into it.
Do you think that when there are more women engaged in aviation and aerospace, that things will start to change in terms of more women expressing their voice, and perhaps some of the rules, regulations, and attitudes will start to evolve into a more accepting or broader space?
I would hope so. I think, and I mean, this is just my personal opinion, the current climate that I'm feeling within the aviation community, there are a lot of opportunities for women, and there aren't nearly as many for men. There's so many scholarships and different, Girls Take Flight days and all these other things that are going on to interest women. And I haven't really seen the same push for men. And I think that it's created a little bit of negativity in the community. And I hope that we can get to a point where, it's no longer necessary to gear these programs specifically for women, and it can just be geared toward men and women, so that men and women can both have the same opportunities, because it's creating kind of like a negative climate. At least that's my opinion, and that's something that I've felt over the last few years.
Well, I think that when we can reach like a gender balance, and everyone is respected in the field for their skills and their talents, as opposed to their gender.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And I think too, right now there's a push for hiring minorities in positions like this, and I think it's important. But it does become a little unfair, especially if somebody is equally as qualified as I am, but then I'm chosen because of my gender, my race, whatever it is. I understand why it's done, and I'm not saying I think it's still important. I think it's valid to do that if you want to get people in positions where they can, impact further change. But I don't necessarily think it's fair. So I can understand some of that negativity too.
Well, I think generally as a society within Canada, we're striving for gender balance, diversity, and inclusion in all areas across our society, because I think it just makes it a more vibrant community, a more vibrant country, a more welcoming and embracing country. So I think that if we're all sort of striving towards that, then eventually we're going to see big changes in our society. And I encouraging women as much as possible to step forward and to express their voice and to realize that they are worthy to having a seat at whatever table or behind whatever wheel they want. I was doing a little research and I came across this terminology. It's called a trail dragger. And you have, I believe, received an award for that. But what is a trail dragger?
Yeah, so the term is actually tail dragger.
Yes.
It's all right. So essentially, you can have two different wheel configurations on an airplane. One where it's called the tricycle gear, and that's your more common configuration, when there's a wheel at the very front, right under the propeller, and then there's two main gears just behind. And the other configuration, which is less common but more traditional, in the sense that most of the first aircraft that were manufactured as tail draggers. And that means that they have two main tires at the front of the aircraft and then just one wheel at the very back. And it is actually, you have to get a special endorsement to even fly these aircraft in the US. In Canada, you don't need an endorsement, but you need a certain amount of hours before most flight schools will let you fly them. Reason being is that they can be quite tricky on landing and takeoff. So you just need to be pretty quick on your feet.
Well, what I'm hearing from you is that you need a lot of skill and training in order to operate the different types of aircraft. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Every aircraft is different. The principles of flight are the same, and it's fairly similar from airplane to airplane. But every airplane will have differences, different engines, different wheel configuration. Primarily, I fly single engine or single piston engine aircraft, but you can then go to twin engine. You can start flying turbines. There's a lot of differences. You can have aircraft with wheel gears or gears in general. So that will impact your flight capabilities as well. So it's pretty heavy when it comes to training, for sure.
Well, when I'm watching you talk about aviation and your experience, I can just see this passion in your face with this big smile. And so this is your driving force going forward. For how is it going to impact your life going forward?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I would say that my path in aviation has been very unconventional in the sense that um, I I am not a commercial pilot, so I'm not working for an operator and I'm not making a living off of flying airplanes. But what I'm doing is I'm making a living off of writing about flying airplanes. So essentially, what I do now is I will travel through North America to fly different aircraft or go to different air shows, experience different fly ins, and talk to people and their adventures, and then share that through the magazine that I write for. So I'm not sure if that kind of answers your question, but essentially that is that's the path that I'm on. It's been a dream of mine for so long, and it's actually only something that I started to do full time last year. So it's been 6 years of writing articles kind of on the side and freelancing here and there to get to this point. But I'm really excited to continue to fly different airplanes and meet different people and hear about their stories and tell their stories and share their stories in hopes that other people will be inspired to do the same.
Well, I think this is getting the word out, and this is embracing the fact that women are very capable. We know a long-standing history of women in aviation, dating back to the first flights that were done, and certainly the women in World War I and World War II who were flying planes to support the troops and joining the armed services. I do have a quote here, and it's from Amy Johnson. And she was a British pilot, a pioneer in the 1930s. And she was saying that it's a pity to lose the romantic side of flying and simply accept it as a form of transportation. And I think in so many ways, the general public sees an airplane as a transportation from one destination to another. But when I talk to you about this, I see passion and energy and engagement, and that I see the romantic side of aviation when I talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I wish more people would have the opportunity to experience aviation like I have. I decided to become a pilot to experience the world differently from a different perspective. And my ambitions in life were always to travel and experience more. And aviation was just kind of a way that I can do that while also challenging myself and growing, skills in different ways. And since then I've traveled through the Yukon, over the Nahanni, and through Alaska and Inuvik, and flown over beluga whales, and flown over wild mustangs in the high Sierras. And there's just so much out there, and I try and share that with others and hope that they might aspire to achieve and experience similar things, and I hope that they see aviation maybe in a different light.
Well, I think that your career path in aviation has taken on the skill set that you want to, but for others, it could be a real career path where they're earning a living, traveling the world, and experiencing aviation on a commercial airline. So there's what I'm seeing here, hearing here, is that there's two ways, or more than two ways, of creating a career path for aviation. I've just got the high sign from Mark that we're coming up to the last 5 minutes, but I just wonder, how do you think your leadership here is going to impact young girls and women into aviation and aerospace?
I think that the more women that we have involved in aviation and aerospace, the more likely over time that will attract more people. And I think it's important to show up. And I think that there's definitely a space for women in aviation. And I think we just are slowly stepping away from conventional careers and giving people, ideas about the different things that they could pursue. So for me personally, I just want to show up and be strong and become respected in the community, because I think that's the most important thing. I want women to be taken seriously in this role. And so I think it's important that people see that through me, and take me seriously as a pilot and as an aviator and as a writer too. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. I went on a tangent there.
Oh, it does, because I understand that you have accreditation from George Brown College in marketing. And of course, what you've done is bridged both your passion for flying and marketing the adventures that you are having and documenting your adventures through North America. And it sounds like a broader airspace. I guess there's not the same kind of boundaries.
Yeah.
But just a little pop question for you, because I said if we had time at the end. What brings you joy other than flying?
I think sharing, period. Sharing my passion for life with other people, and sharing adventure with others. I think that's what brings me joy. So.
And do you have a saying or a mantra that gets you through the day? We've all been going through this pandemic and it just doesn't seem to ever end. But do you have a little saying that helps you get through the day, or if you are in tricky situations when you're in the air?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, it's not, I wouldn't say it's my mantra, but overall, I would say that whatever you're doing, be all in. And so whether that is a new resolution that you have for the year, your what you decide to be your purpose in life, or something as simple as spending time with others, whatever you're pursuing in life, if you're all in, I feel like you will have incredible results. So.
Oh, thank you, Annie. It has been such a pleasure talking to you today, and thank you so much for taking the time. And please join us next time for another amazing journey on her story, the journey to winning a seat at the table.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.